Hello, friends and bees, and friends who are also bees. Pardon me, and welcome to this week's Indie Thursday stream. This week we are going to be continuing our playthrough of Higurashi, Yoigoshi. When we left off last week, we were beginning to get to the bottom of everyone's secrets. We've done Otobe and Yae, and our next step is to move on to your friend and mine, Mion Sonozaki, inverted commas. So let's swap over to the gameplay. If it decides it wants to work. There we go. I don't know what's going on at the moment. I apologise if there's lots of background noises, that's just my life. Let us load right in from last Thursday. So I missed the text journal, but it was basically, I believe, that Mion took her grandmother's place when her grandmother died in the Great Hinamizawa disaster, I think. Anyway, she says, there were people out there who didn't like that development. A section of old heavyweights within the group slid off into their own splinter faction. Does that mean those men in black were targeting you, Mion? Precisely. Those men are trying to prevent me from being named the successor in accordance with their ancient traditions. So this is an internal conflict within the Sonozaki family. I thought back on the men in black who were here earlier and shivered. In that sense, they were even worse than ghosts. So, Mion, does that mean you can become the successor as long as you follow the traditions? Oh, come on, it's not that simple. Not really. There exists a family heirloom passed down between leaders of the Sonozaki family. As long as I can obtain it, I'll be recognised as the legitimate successor, according to our ancient traditions. Because only the true successor knows its location. Family heirloom? Is that what you were looking for in the ritual storehouse, Miss Sonozaki? Indeed, a small bell. For generations, the Sonozaki family head has settled arguments with a shake of that bell. And with the passing of the previous head, Oryo Sonozaki, only I know the whereabouts of the bell. Although even I don't know the precise location. I just know that a scroll found in the ritual storehouse of the Furude shrine tells the precise location. I looked at the scroll casually rolled out on the floor. So that's why she was reading that thing so intently. It's Chekhov's scroll, given that we haven't had that mentioned, or if it does, it was way before we started to learn everyone's secrets and stuff. And there's one more thing. There's an heirloom with the three families, the Tamahajiki sword, which is apparently the key to reaching the bell. As she said that, Miss Sonozaki held up her own sword, which oddly made a gun noise. So you understand? Those men in black are from the Splinter faction. They don't want me to find that bell, and they intend to settle things once and for all by killing me here in this abandoned village. If that's the case, are those people responsible for our cars disappearing too? Probably. They probably attacked Tawara because they thought she was an ally of mine. There's a good chance they intend to kill everyone here. Everyone? If they see your face and think you're doing something wrong, they'll kill you. It's a common occurrence in this world of ours. A common occurrence? Those words drove home how she'd been living in a completely different world. It's easy enough to say, but what can we do? That said, we're out of options. I'm here together with Yakuza and the police. All I can do is rely on them. That being the case, I'm better off sticking with the police. According to the scroll, the bell is hidden in the Sonozaki family's main house. So at this point, I'm going to the main house. I'll go with you. Uh-huh. You too, Miyuki? Our enemies are likely to appear at the main house, intent on stopping Mion. I'd originally planned to request reinforcements from the Okonomiya Police Department, but it looks like that's not an option. I could see fierce resolve on Miyuki's face. It seems like she's willing to risk her life to secure evidence of these guys' wrongdoings. Of course, there's still the option of waiting for the investigation team that was supposed to accompany Miyuki. But considering that battle earlier, there's a good chance those guys suspected the police's involvement, meaning they'd hide everything and pull out. And if that happened, the police would be letting a big fish right out of their net, so she had no time to waste. Then Miss Sonozaki had a huge grin on her face, like she'd figured out Miyuki's intentions. "Why, you're an unruly girl. Thank you." Felt like I could feel Miss Sonozaki's unyielding spirit through her smiling face. Perhaps Miyuki's reckless behavior reminded Miss Sonozaki of her past self. "How about you, Arakawa? Are you serious?" If I went along with Miyuki, what could I do? Since we were all in the same boat, did that mean we had no other choice but to throw ourselves into the middle of a Yakuza conflict? "Ryunosuke, what would you like to do?" "I think it would be safer to stay here, but..." "No, they know we're here. It's only a matter of time until they come back here with even more men. And they won't go easy on you just because you're civilians. So in short, they'll kill us if we stay here. But they'll never expect us to attack their stronghold directly. We can use that to our advantage. I think it would be best for all of you to come with us. Having said that, you'll face all manner of dangers, so I'm not sure how well I can protect all of you. I'll do my best, but given the situation, I can't guarantee that you'll survive." Otobe had been thinking it over for a while, but before long he raised his head with a resolute look on his face. "I'll go with you. No, please take me with you." "Otobe? I've already thrown my life away once before, and if I go with, I might be able to do something to help you two. Would that be alright?" Hold on. Pardon me. When did he start sounding so dependable? "What about you, Arakawa?" "Of course I'll go too. Even if the odds are against us, I'll do everything in my power to protect Miyuki. Really though, given our recent history, I'll be the one needing protection." Miyuki carefully looked me over with an expression that seemed to say, "Are you really okay with that?" Well, she's probably feeling guilty about getting me involved, but no matter what, I'm a man. I'm prepared for what's coming. Insert sarcasm here. The rain seems to have stopped. It was starting to get a little brighter outside the window. The sun was beginning to rise and the birds had started to sing. Miss Sonozaki tightly tied her hair behind her head. "Let's go." With that one statement, we rose to our feet at once. However, Miss Tawada didn't move. She continued absent-mindedly sitting next to Kurosawa's corpse. "Miss Tawada? I'll stay here." "What are you saying? Didn't you hear what you were just talking about? The Yakuza will kill you if you stay here." Miss Tawada shook her head to cut him off, then looked up with tears in her eyes. "It's all right. I'd like to stay here a little longer with Takumi. I want to think things through on my own." Miss Tawada shrugged her shoulders once more, probably thinking back on what Kurosawa said earlier. Her voice was muffled and the tears were still coming out. "But let her do as she wishes. Mion, I don't think you'll be able to handle this, but maybe you'll be able to use it as a bluff." As she said that, Miss Sonozaki gently handed her a handgun. Miss Tawada deeply bowed her head, with huge tears still filling her eyes. "Thank you very much." Miss Tawada turned her body back towards Kurosawa's corpse again. Even though his lips weren't moving, she intently gazed at him as though she could hear him speaking. It seemed like she was trying to repent for her actions, but it also seemed like she was trying to quietly communicate once more with the love she'd lost. Either way, it wasn't our place to interfere. So we made our way out of the assembly hall, leaving Miss Tawada behind. I should have just finished the chapter last time round. Started on the cliffhanger of going to the Sonozaki house, but there we are. Live and learn, huh? You learn and learn. A cold breeze blew through the shrine grounds. Okay, so I think we're on Tobe Repents now, maybe? Or to the Sonozaki main house, I can't remember. Blew through the shrine grounds. The rain-soaked stones near the shrine gate shimmered in the sunlight. We followed Miss Sonozaki down the stone steps and began walking along the country road. I wonder if Miss Tawada will be okay. An image of her floated across my mind, sitting alone in the assembly hall by Kurosawa's side, sinking into the depths of grief, regret, and despair. I doubt there's even the tiniest sliver of hope in her mind right now. We left Miss Tawada alone in that state. Doesn't it seem like we abandoned her? Do you think she's planning to die? I wonder. That's for her to decide. Was it really the right choice to leave her behind? Otobe seemed to be thinking the same thing, but Mion simply shrugged his shoulders and looked back at the assembly hall with a tender expression. Nobody other than she herself can understand what's right for her. However, she did her utmost to live and to love him, and after thinking it over for herself, she chose to kill him. If she hadn't heard those last words from Kurosawa, the despair she locked away would have crushed her and eventually ruined her. But she came back. No, maybe it's more correct to say he brought her back. At this point, Tawada needs to regret what she's done and think hard about what she should do from here on, and do her best not to squander Kurosawa's feelings. But even if she thinks it over as hard as possible, that doesn't change the fact that she did something wrong. Not to mention, the crime she committed won't just disappear. Well, of course. Sonozaki looked away while chuckling to herself, then turned her back to us and continued walking. And then, that girl won't regret what she does next. That's what it means to take responsibility for the outcome. And that outcome will be what she believed to be best, so we'll have no choice but to accept that. In the end, she can choose to die by his side, or to go on living by herself. But there's no longer room in there to lie to herself. So I believe she'll make the right choice. The best choice for herself. The important thing isn't to ask what to do, or to panic about what you can do on your own. It's to take responsibility for your own choices. I could feel the weight behind Miss Sonozaki's words. Maybe she's been living her whole life like that. She kind of has. What about me? Before I knew it, I was thinking about the editorial department back in Tokyo. Am I fine with things the way they are? Can I really keep up this charade as a popular writer? I finally managed to find work as an occult writer, but there's no telling if I'll be able to keep that up in the future. My success up until now was largely due to the Hinamizawa interview tapes my father left behind. I can't depend on that forever. I need to accomplish something of my own merit. It's normal to jump around between various jobs, even up to 35 years old, but sooner or later, I need to find a way of securing my future life, instead of feeling at a loss for my own personal value. This village, Hinamizawa, was the story that changed my father's life as a reporter. To be perfectly honest, I didn't come here based on some intuition. That was just nonsense I made up. Saying I wanted to find out something about my father was merely a convenient excuse. In fact, I've largely exhausted all my occult material lately, and my desperation to find something new may have been part of the reason I came to Hinamizawa. But I understand now that haphazard lifestyle is no way to live. That way of thinking is what got me into this mess. Even if the ghosts and curses were sidelined by a Yakuza conflict, this crisis might just be me suffering the consequences of my choices. Oh, Ryunosuke, take a look at this. What is it? I turned in the direction Miyuki was pointing. Over there, a motorcycle was carefully hidden behind a grove of trees. I didn't notice it because it was so dark last night, but it looked like something new. It probably came from one of the people who attacked Miss Sonozaki and the rest of us. Unfortunately enough, the keys were still in the ignition. They're not here? I carefully inspected the surrounding area, then approached the motorcycle and tried to start it. It worked? Whoa! Everyone's faces immediately brightened up. With this, we can head straight to the Okonomiya police station. But who should go? It's a small motorcycle, so 2 passengers would be tough. If we're going to take it, 1 passenger would be best. In which case... Miyuki. Yes? Take this and go to Okonomiya. And if you make it somewhere your phone can connect, dial 911 right away. Me? Wait a minute. She shook her head in surprise. She never expected I'd nominate her to go. I understand Miss Sonozaki, but Ryunosuke, you and Otobe are just regular civilians, right? I can't leave you guys alone to charge into such a dangerous place. Otobe, Ryunosuke, please, one of you should go. But I don't have a motorcycle license. Me neither. Liar. Ryunosuke, didn't you tell me earlier you were planning to ride your motorcycle here? Busted. Plus, if you take this bike, maybe it's not the most admirable choice, but Ryunosuke, Otobe, you can leave the village together. That way you'll be safe. And to be perfectly honest, if you stay here, you'll just be in the way. I don't think you'll be that much better yourself. Once Miss Sonozaki pointed that out, Miyuki let out a sigh. And after last night, it was abundantly clear why she didn't want her sticking around. Miyuki, aren't you low on ammo anyway? You sighed after you counted your remaining bullets last night, right? That's true, but still. At any rate, I doubt the people we're against will give a damn if you try flashing your badge at them. Someone who works in anti-yakuza like yourself should be well aware of that, yes? I admire your sense of justice, but I wouldn't allow you to have a death wish. Shouldn't you be saying that to the two of them? Miyuki refused to back down. To be honest, I really appreciated her show of spirit. But even so, we shouldn't be arguing here. We had no time to waste. There's no time. We're going with Miss Sonozaki. Besides, speaking of motorcycles, during my research, I learned there's a secret escape route out of the village hidden in the Sonozaki residence. Isn't that so? Yes. If you stay on that road, you'll avoid the people waiting for Miss Sonozaki. So Miyuki, I need you to contact the police and get their support. Besides, wasn't it your original mission to catch these guys? Ryunosuke. Miyuki was still hesitating to give me an answer. Even if we took the motorcycle out of the village, we could still run into the enemy patrol party. There was no guarantee that we'd be able to escape to safety. Updating the title. I wonder, can you still only 5 tags, bugger? But the odds of survival are better if we travel to the Sonozaki main house together, and it's something we can do to give us all hope. If we can just buy some time, the police will come save us. I can believe in that. Plus, if Miyuki can call in reinforcements from Okonomiya, she'll be able to hold down the scene and collect necessary evidence. Even in the worst case, they'll be able to cut off a retreat. Seemed like a reasonable argument to me. But there's no way I could put it all into words. There is indeed a hidden passage in the grounds of the Sonozaki residence. From there, you'll be able to get out of the village without being followed. What about you, Mion? Do you have to ask? I'm going to settle this, regardless if the police make it here or not. In other words, she was prepared to offer them a challenge right here and right now. Miyuki, hurry. We'll be alright, and we'll be waiting for your support. Understood. I'll be back as soon as possible, so please don't do anything crazy, everyone. Miyuki finally seemed to reach a decision. She straddled the motorcycle, then looked back to us and lightly nodded. I gave her a strong nod in response, and then she flew down the mountain road at full speed. Foley work provided by that motorcycle outside, which I'm pretty certain caught on mic. Hey, Arakawa. Yes? How do you know about the secret passage in the Sonozaki estate? Eh? Telling me it really exists? Thank goodness. Huh? The Sonozaki's eyes opened wide as soon as she heard that, although even I was surprised to hear her confirm it. Nicely done. But anyway, we're out of time. Let's get going. Inspired by Miyuki's declaration, we all started walking again. Settings, chat only. Settings only apply. There we go. Got plenty of battery on my phone at least. We all started walking again. Was that the first time she sincerely praised me? The scenery in the bright daylight looked completely different than it did in the middle of the night. The trees that seemed to go on endlessly in the dark back then were instead lush, green, gently swaying in the wind. Before long, Atabe let out a heavy sigh as we reached a road halfway up the mountain. We all looked pale from our lack of sleep, but Atabe's face looked particularly bad. Atabe, are you alright? Yeah. Ever since we left the assembly hall, Atabe had been walking with an expression that looked like something was on his mind. Thinking back on it, that's right. It started about the time we were descending those steps, right after Miss Sonozaki spoke about Mr. Wada. The important thing isn't to ask what to do, or to panic about what you can do on your own. It's to take responsibility for your own choices. As Atabe listened to that, he'd gasped, and his eyes had opened wide like he'd realised something. Something about those words seemed to resonate deep within him. But if there's one thing I can say, it's that his face looks far more earnest this morning than it did last night. Oh! Eventually, we reached a bend in the road with one white car parked in front of us. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary passenger car, but something about its shape looked familiar. I caught my breath. That's right, I remember. The windows were wrapped in duct tape and there were 3 dead people inside who looked like they were sleeping. This is the car we found when we first arrived, with the bodies of the 3 suicide victims. Foley work for engine provided by cars outside? Hey, Otobe? Otobe bit his lip and rushed towards the car. Then he stopped over the duct tape that had fallen to the ground and opened the rear passenger door. I smashed the windows yesterday, so there were no longer any traces of carbon monoxide. Nevertheless, the ashes of the thoroughly burned charcoal flew into the air as soon as he opened the door, and I frowned as soon as the peculiar odour reached my nose. Utagawa, Machi, Chiaki. Otobe looked at each of their faces, one by one. I see. So those are their names. I looked them over once more, but they'll never move again. They looked so peaceful, as if they were just sleeping. But we'll never see smiles on their faces, like they had when they came to this village. Before long, Otobe had been silently watching the 3 of them, just like me. But then he slowly opened his mouth. Somewhere deep in my heart, I probably realised how selfish I was being. I realised on my own that compared to Miss Tawada's act of murder, stealing a card from the pocket of someone who committed suicide is far less severe. But after hearing what Mion had to say, I thought it over. When considering it with a scale we call earnest effort, maybe there's something about the weight of a sin that can't be measured. Everyone has been fighting as hard as they can to go on living. Struggling and struggling, worrying and suffering with no end in sight. That was why Miss Tawada killed her boyfriend. And why these people killed themselves. Making an earnest effort to live a proper life was what drove Miss Tawada to murder. Living a careless lifestyle and taking on debts that can never be repaid made Otobe contemplate suicide. Seems foolish to even consider comparing the 2 of them, but it's no simple task to decide which sin is heavier. Indeed, Otobe was still relying on others even as he was approaching death. He didn't have the courage to die alone. Unlike Miss Tawada, who was racked by guilt even as she was consumed by despair, he was going on living comfortably. That fact probably made him evaluate the weight of his sins. Otobe had a serious look on his face as he pulled the cash card out of his pocket. I didn't have the same resolve as everyone else. They all had a tragic but courageous resolve that drove them to suicide here. I was just happy to go somewhere with other people. Even as we were heading into our final moments, it felt like a group of friends going on a trip. It was reckless, but it was fun. Everyone was heading there to die, but it felt completely different for me. I simply wasn't prepared to die. So when I saw that cash card, when I realised I could start my life over, I jumped at it right away. I allowed them all to continue down the road to death, and then I ran away alone. How shallow. In the end, I was just looking for an easy, comfortable life. I couldn't even find a cute girlfriend on my own. My co-workers had to introduce me to someone. Nevertheless, after she was gone, I hated my co-workers for introducing me to her. How dare you introduce me to a girl like that? I felt bitter, like they were looking down on me for getting so fired up over a girl of that caliber. And no matter how much my parents cheered me on, I resented that they only looked on from afar, unwilling to understand my suffering. I continued to go on living by blaming others for all my problems like that. Come on, don't beat yourself up over it. It's fine. I'm not beating myself up over it. I'm owning up to who I was. Otobe looked like he was about to burst into tears, but it wasn't like the miserable weeping he did last night. Glug glug. Felt like he was prepared to confront himself. I've wasted all this time falling into that hell because I was too weak to deal with it. I developed an inferiority complex after being bullied in the countryside and wanted to prove myself. I wanted to look down on all the people who laughed at me. But in the end, I let that inferiority complex take control, and I fell prey to moneylenders, losing any respectability I had. Really, I'm such an idiot. Sucked dry by the villains of this world. Crying, cursing, and resenting other people. And I was about to die to escape it. As Otobe pinched those words out, he placed the stolen cash card in Chiaki's hand and squeezed it tight. I didn't earn this money, so let me give it back. What are you going to do about your debts? It's fine. I was being shallow, chasing some lofty dream, always blaming others for the problems in my life. Studying in school was the one thing I was good at. The teachers at school always told me I was a well-behaved kid. In order to be the good kid that always received praise, I locked away the ability to assert myself. That's why I always felt so irritated. I became conceited, telling myself I wasn't meant to rot away in a place like that. But I didn't have the courage to betray people's expectations or the will to try and fail at something. I lost sight of myself while searching for the things I couldn't fail at. In hindsight, you realised, even the act of thinking only in terms of success was an arrogant and cowardly way of thinking. Mustering all your strength on something and trying your best when the result is uncertain. Not giving up until you discover your own limits. One cannot possibly hope to discover their true dreams and capabilities without putting in that effort. I'm a moron. From now on, I want to take back my life. I've decided I'm going to do my best to keep on living. I'm going to face the reality in front of me head on, no matter how hopeless it is, no matter how little I can do about it. If I keep on struggling and keep on living, I'm certain I'll open a way forward. Of course, there's a lot to be anxious about. There's no way to repay millions in debt. Even with the help of my parents back in the countryside, I wouldn't be able to repay that kind of money. Not to mention that the feud with my parents was never really resolved. If I returned home from Tokyo and confessed I've accumulated mountains of debt, their faces would twist and they'd beat me, crying. They'd kick me out of the house. But even so, I have to start from there. The odds are terrible, close to zero, but I'm reaping what I sowed. If Ms. Tawada's guilt is a cross she'll have to bear moving forward, then I need to carry the weight of my past in order to atone for it. And now at last, I'll be able to get back on the proper path. Otobe knelt down on the ground, and then Akutagawa, Machi, Chiaki, I wish I could have stopped you from killing yourselves. I came all the way out here driven by such half-assed motives. I ran away on my own. I didn't just leave you to die, I robbed you too. I'm so sorry. I was foolish and weak. Please forgive me. He sincerely lowered his head all the way down to the muddy soil. Miss Sonozaki and I could only watch as Otobe remained like that. Religious teachings state that the souls of those who commit suicide can never find peace. Even if that's just superstition, throwing away the life that your parents gave you is something that should never be done, no matter the reason, says Arakawa. What parent has no aspirations for the child they gave birth to? Many of them. What parent doesn't feel the joy of watching their child grow up? Many of them. People can't survive on their own. And at the same time, there's no reason for people to live alone. You can't turn your back on the hopes, dreams, the expectations of others. It doesn't take long to decide on the right path and keep walking. That's why you have to see it all the way to the end. But what if I don't want to? What's the meaning of being born into this world? It doesn't matter, it doesn't have a meaning. Life's meaningless, do what the fuck you want. Do unto others as you would have done to you. What does it matter? Otobe. I didn't pity him, nor did I admire him. And that's because I'm just like him. Even though I overstate how successful I am, I deluded myself into thinking my way of life was mine alone. Being lazy and letting the flow of life push me around. After all this time, I finally realized it. Right here, right now, I'm just like Otobe. The next moment, oh. It's alright. Uh-huh. I felt like I heard a soft, gentle woman's voice. Chiaki? And Otobe seemed to hear it too. He clung to the body of Chiaki in the back seat. I prefer the idea of there not being like supernatural ghosts and stuff. I prefer the idea of it being a shared delusion. A shared delusion as a result of Hinamizawa syndrome. Could this be another voice of the dead? It's alright, Otobe. If this money can help you out, you can have it. If it gives you the will to go on living, I'm happy to help. The lips of the dead woman in the backseat weren't moving, but just like with Kurosawa earlier, the voice seemed to echo inside my head. It really did feel like I could hear her voice. I held nothing against you, and I'm sure my husband doesn't either. So don't worry about it, alright? Chiaki. You want to keep it quiet, that's fine. No one will blame you. So go ahead, take all our wealth. Let me give it all to you. Toby hesitantly stared at the cash card for a while, but eventually he tightened his lips and nodded his head. Then he reached out and squeezed Chiaki's hand, holding the cash card. Thank you, Chiaki, but I don't need it, Toby. Because I've learned that life isn't about waiting for the opportunity to give it your all. It's about constantly giving it your all. I'm a worthless human being. I'm the weak person who immediately blames other people. That's the kind of person I've been all this time. The first step is to admit that. You can't change your tone as soon as something convenient comes around. And if you want to overcome your weaknesses, you have to put in the effort without giving in to despair. That's the kind of person I want to become. Right here, right now. If I take this money, I'm sure nothing will change. I'm sure someone will help me. It's only a matter of time until my luck turns around, so I just have to wait. Somewhere in my heart, I believe that. The time has come to stop thinking like that. From now on, I need to be stronger. That's why I don't need this. I'll struggle, I'll suffer, and I'll feel despair, but I'll rise above it and I'll keep on living. Until the day I die, I'll go on living with all my might. Though Otobe spoke softly, every word he said was full of resolve. I see. Her voice sounded a little disappointed, but even more than that, it was wrapped in a gentle warmth. I also wish I hadn't died. Eh? Otobe squeezed Chiaki's hands, but her face didn't move at all. I'd heard you say all that when I was still alive. I might have changed my mind. Maybe I was just lying to myself about wanting to see my dead husband again. Maybe I just didn't have the confidence to live on my own. Maybe I should have tried harder to find a way to live. When we all came out to commit suicide, I honestly felt so happy. I didn't realise how long it had been since I did something together with friends. I didn't have anyone to talk to. It was hard and painful. I wanted things to get easier as soon as possible. Every time I saw a person living happily, it reminded me of the painful life I was living. But pain is a natural part of life, and the value of human life can only be measured by the means by which we overcome that pain. I wish I had this conversation with you when I was still alive. Chiaki, I'm sorry. Tobe deeply bowed his head. In the end, it was just like Mr. Wada, refusing to consider anything outside your own assumptions and ultimately leading to a sad ending. Tobe, thank you. I turned towards Akutagawa's body in the driver's seat. He was an aging man with traces of grey hair and deep wrinkles from enduring trying experiences. I'm glad I met you. There are people out there who can't accomplish things on their own, who are quick to use dishonest methods and betray and hurt others. I've given up all hope on other people. But to think that there were young people like you out there too. I wish I'd spoken to the wife and children I left behind, once more. I gave up on life and ran away. Whatever your reason for abandoning suicide, all I can say is hang in there. Akutagawa. Otobe, don't give up. Otobe, give it your best shot. Otobe, hang in there. Chiaki, Machi, Akutagawa, thank you. I'll keep on living as best as I can. Otobe closed the car door and lowers his head once again, his eyes full of tears. Miss Sonozaki gently patted him on the shoulder while giving him a comforting smile. Life is like a tube of toothpaste. Mion, you have to squeeze every last drop out of it. That's life. Her voice resounded heavily inside my heart. Struggling to find the right thing to do is a part of life. If you want to live strictly according to right and wrong, or if you want to live according to some concrete plan, you have the freedom to choose either way. And if you don't always get your way, that's life. Success and failure don't matter as long as you're walking down the path that you decided. That's more important than if you earn a living or not, or if it's a stable life. It's meaningless to judge people according to arbitrary values and label them winners and losers. I won't lose my way focusing on appearances or self-interest. I just need to keep walking forward on the path my heart dictates. Or something. Arakawa. Huh? Miss Sonozaki turned to face me, her face seeming to say, you too. Live with all your might. Keep on fighting, for as long as you live. Ow. I raised my head. The mountain peaks all around me had a beautiful blue hue. The road that stretched in front of me felt like it led on to a bright future. Having terrible things happen in the Sonozaki house, probably. I'm going to drop a save just because it seems like a good place to do so. Going to make a horrible noise by accidentally hitting the mic with my phone like an idiot. I think we're in Otobe Repents. And our next chapter is like this, I think, is to the Sonozaki main house. But whatever. We left the suicide car behind and began walking down the narrow road. Before long, we arrived back on a country road. Vivid white cloud was floating just over the horizon, and a variety of lush vegetation was spread out before us. The road continued forward with old houses along both sides. It's a village. Are you talking in your sleep? It's the same village we could see from the shrine. This is Hinamizawa. Miss Sonozaki continued swiftly walking as she said that. Spider webs were stretched across the decayed wooden house. The windows were broken and glass was scattered all around. I didn't really notice when I was looking at the mountains and the trees, but when I look at this house, it really does look like an abandoned village. Suddenly, I remembered that I came here for work, but I was in no mood to be taking pictures. After everything that's happened here, I couldn't bring myself to think about journalism. Huh? That moment, Otobe suddenly stopped in his tracks. He was staring at a large white mansion up ahead. Whoa. I was just thinking even though these houses are really old, there's one that doesn't look so old. Oh, now that's a humongous house. I feel like someone rich must have lived there. Miss Sonozaki stopped beside us, then gently gazed at the mansion. It seemed like she'd completely tuned out her existence, like she was remembering something. Oh, what's wrong? She stopped all of a sudden. Even though I called out to her, Miss Sonozaki didn't answer. Her eyes were gazing off far in the distance. Is this a dream? An illusion? Or maybe... Hurry, let's go! Someone dressed in a school uniform slipped by my side, running like the wind. It was him. Damn it, we're late. We need to move. Fast. No, wait up, Keiichi. Then, a girl dressed in a scarf ran by my other side. It was her. Who's gonna get there first? Is it a race? Whoever gets to their seat first wins. All right, I was hoping you'd say that. I've got the strength of a man. Don't underestimate me. The two of them gently looked back at me and waved. They were bursting with energy, with huge smiles on their faces. What's wrong, Mion? Mion, hurry up. Reina. Keiichi. That's right. Wait for me, Keiichi. Reina. I'll be there as soon as I can, because I'm heading there right away. Miss Sonozaki? Miss Sonozaki let out a quick sigh before coming back to her senses. She'd been gazing at that mansion with a nostalgic look in her eyes for a while. Then she gently wiped the corner of her eye and turned away. You all right? Yeah, pardon me for stopping. Let's go. Then she took off walking at a quick pace. She said she was a resident of this village. If that's the truth, then maybe she had some precious memories of the person who lived in that house. Oh, whatever. Honestly, I wish I was interested to learn more, but this wasn't the time. Irony, of course, is that it is Keiichi's house, and Keiichi, I'm pretty certain, is the guy who cursed his dad. There we go. The Sonozaki was walking at such a brisk pace that I had a hard enough time keeping up with her, let alone time to think idle thoughts. Shortly afterwards, I began to see a chain-link fence stretched across the shoulder of the road. The fence was tall and sharp, spear-like tips were folded towards this side. Beyond that, some rusty, tattered barbed wire was wrapped around. There were signs attached to the fence here and there. The signs were battered from exposure to the elements, so the letters were faded and hardly legible. I could just barely make out the characters for no trespassing and no entry. Apparently they wanted to make it abundantly clear that this area was off limits. Mion, all of this is your house? I wouldn't describe it as a house so much as property. It's what they call a private estate. Everything inside there is your yard? Not at all. It's just property. There's nothing out there but mountains. Overcome with curiosity, Otobe restlessly scanned our surroundings. I'd be snapping photos of the entire area if not for our current situation. Unfortunate. Before long, a magnificent fence came into view that seemed to encircle the entire mansion. This was the headquarters of the entire Sonozaki clan, one of the 3 great families who controlled Hinamizawa in the old days. Everything surrounding the mansion boasted an intimidating facade, unashamed to flaunt the Sonozaki name. Mechanical objects that almost looked like toys were plastered here and there on the wall. Perhaps those were the remnants of security cameras installed here in the past. Eventually, we reached a gate with a massive set of double doors that looked like a shrine or something. I'd expect no less from the 3 families. It's a rather impressive gate. The gate was decaying from exposure to the wind and rain, and spiderwebs were littered all around it. However, the spiderweb stretching across the edge of one of the doors appeared unnaturally broken. Most likely, proof that other people had been coming or going through here just a little while ago. Quiet. If you can hear like a thunking noise in the background, it's because the wind is slamming my door a little bit. It's annoying because it means I'll have to close my window. Oh well. After examining the spiderwebs in disarray, Miss Sonozaki leaned forwards and lightly peered through the gap between the doors. She let out a telling sigh before calling back to Otobe and I. She began to say, "Ready?" in a hushed voice, like she was trying to warn us. Secret passages deep in the Sonozaki forest. Go past the garden. The entrance is an underground storeroom further back, but getting there won't be easy. Uh-huh. A guest from earlier are waiting for us. Miss Sonozaki gestured forward with her chin. I looked through the gap in the door as she indicated and couldn't help but raise my voice. There were a dozen or so men dressed in black suits, all standing in a line and facing this direction, as if they were just waiting for us to open the gate. What should we do? Can't be helped. We just have to do it. Do it? Relax, I can fight them alone. You guys should wait here. Is Miss Sonozaki planning to take them all down on her own? Isn't that totally reckless? However, after I deal with them, you'll be on your own to reach the secret passage, because I need to go get that bell. Then I'll go with you. Don't be absurd. Any civilian walking into the main house unarmed will be slaughtered in an instant. But I have to do something for your sake, Mion. Otobe desperately pleaded with her. Miss Sonozaki looked into his eyes and smiled bitterly. I understand why you'd want to put your life on the line. However, you still have a full life ahead of you. This is my problem, so I'll settle it on my own. Mion, I'm glad I met you. Before meeting you, I never could have spoken about my hardships. Feels like I've been reborn. So please promise me this. Please. You must not under any circumstances throw your life away. Otobe gazed at Miss Sonozaki with a serious expression. Then she responded to his desperate plea with a shrug of her shoulders and a bitter smile. I promise. Anyway, you guys need to advance during the gap I opened for you. What about you, Mion? I'm heading to the back of the main house. The bell should be behind a hanging scroll. The lock is decorated scabbard sitting in an alcove. The lock is scabbard? That's right. There's a mechanism that activates if the Tamahajiki sword is inserted there. So if you put the sword in that particular sheath, the door of something will open, leading to the bell? That's right. There should be a door hidden behind the scroll. The bell is stored inside there. Once I get it open, I'll grab the bell and head for the underground storeroom in the forest. There's a well hidden inside there that connects to an underground passage. We'll meet up there. Got it. Otobe responded vigorously. His rejoicing made it all the way through to my heart. A bit confused about where we're going, but c'est la vie. Just follow Otobe. Otobe was thrilled that Miss Sonozaki was willing to share the details of her plan with us. This is what it's like to earn someone's trust. Arakawa. Yes? You and Otobe need to head to the secret passage together. I'll catch up later. Okay. Miss Sonozaki carefully looked over both her faces. For a moment, her pupils opened wide and her eyes darkened. Probably concerned about leaving this world before accomplishing her goal in life. When the light returned to her eyes, Miss Sonozaki stiffened her lip. Let's go. I guess that was her getting possessed by something. Miss Sonozaki lifted the hem of her kimono and vigorously kicked the door. As soon as the door came open, the men in black reached for their guns and swords all at once. A sharp-eyed man with grey hair was standing in the middle of the group. Rather bold of you to issue a challenge knowing we were here. I'd expect no less from my predecessor, former head of the Sonozaki family, Mion Sonozaki. Big mouth from someone who had to bring his lackeys with him. Mifune. The man she called Mifune twisted the edge of his mouth into a thin smile. I assume my mother's shooting was your handiwork? You were loyal to the previous family head, so I can't believe you'd betray the Sonozaki family. You sure got guts, waltzing into the Sonozaki family's doorstep like it's nothing. Allow me to counter that argument. You have no place calling me a traitor. I was the one who advised that a woman like you didn't have what it took to keep a firm grip on the reins of the Sonozaki group. Mifune's expression didn't change at all as he declared that. Miss Sonozaki kept her sharp, bloodthirsty gaze focused right on him. Originally, I was the designated family head, and next in line to lead the Sonozaki group, but you were always the most strongly opposed. You always complained I was young and inexperienced. I heard from Kasai. You were dabbling in smuggling operations behind my father's back, weren't you? In order to keep it from being exposed, and to expand that business, you killed Mum and Dad. I don't know which lucky you heard that from, but it's a false accusation. I've been doing everything in my power to expand the profits and influence of the group. Your father was jealous and tried to take it all for himself. In the end, the weight of the Sonozaki group's name was too heavy a burden for people like you. Whether the burden is too much to bear or not, is not something you could hope to determine. How can people with eyes clouded by greed pass judgment? It's in your best interest to shut that mouth of yours right now. It's time to get down to business. Hand over the bell. Mifune stretched out his hand and lifted out the sleeve of his kimono while approaching Sonozaki step by step. At the same time, the men in black slowly closed the distance between us. Even I'm not heartless to raise a hand against the daughter of a man I served. If you tell me where it is, I'll spare your life. What do you say? Don't make me laugh. You must already know. I'd never hand it over so easily. This worthless chatter is simply a waste of both our times. Mifune let out a strange cackle, but his eyes weren't laughing at all. Then he turned to Otobe and I with eyes like a predator stalking its prey. Otobe's shoulders sagged like he'd taken a physical blow. What are you doing, Otobe? If you lose your resolve now, you won't be any help to Miss Sonozaki. Just get in the way. Arakawa gently grabbed my arm, calling out to me in a hushed voice. I shook off his arm and resolutely stared back at Mifune. Don't you make like it, Miss Sonozaki. Kill them. In that provocation, Mifune lightly twitched his lips, and the next moment, the men in black all began to move at once. What? Did my flipper remark just trigger the battle? Arakawa, what are you doing? Tobe grabbed my hand and pulled me behind the door. Immediately after that, the men in black fired 2 bullets back to back. You gotta be kidding me. These guys don't hesitate for a moment to attack civilians. What was all that bullcrap about not being heartless? Just then, don't waste your bullets on amateurs. Miss Sonozaki slashed her still-sheathed sword towards the man's wrist, knocking the gun clean out of his hand. The man looked back and pulled a knife out of his pocket, but before he could do anything more, she swung her katana into the man's neck. In just 2 seconds, one man had already collapsed to the ground. Then, as the other men looked on and prepared themselves, Miss Sonozaki pulled the string on her sword bag and slowly pulled the sheathed sword from within. Bring it on. If anyone would like a taste, I'm happy to serve you. Mion, don't come any closer. Otobe began to step out from behind the door, but stopped the moment he heard her commanding voice. That moment, she pulled the Tamahajiki sword from its scabbard, and the blade glistened in the sunlight. She stood in an unconventional stance, with the sword held underhand, which seemed to leave many openings. However, she gazed forward with a piercing glare, far too terrifying to easily take advantage of the opening. Can't be civil here. If you don't want to die, don't come any closer. She was filled to the brim with overwhelming determination. How was she able to hide all that energy in that slender body of hers? It is Neon/Eon. Damn you, bitch. Undaunted, the men all leapt towards her at once. However, too slow. The men collapsed to their knees, then down to the ground. Blood was pouring out everywhere I looked. It was clear as day that this was a battlefield. However, their fighting spirit gradually waned after a few skillful blows from steel with the speed and sharpness to cut through bone. As the men in back pressed on, armed with knives, Miss Sonozaki let loose with her katana. She took one down with a sweep of her leg, then sliced into her stomach. There were at least 10 men in black, but in the blink of an eye, they were falling to the ground one by one. Some were still twitching on the ground, unable to rise to their feet. Of course they didn't bother moving. The shock from their sword attacks and the fear of Miss Sonozaki would make it impossible to rise up. They were defeated in an instant. The people who fell to the ground in a flash immediately realised the difference in ability. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. This many opponents really isn't a problem at all for Miss Sonozaki. Sorry, I wanted to check something. She had that much spirit. In the clash of spirit and energy, she claimed total victory. I'd expect no less from the future head of the Sonozaki family. I couldn't take my eyes off the dance of her swords, and 2 other people gazed at her with eyes just like mine. Otobe and the other man over there, Mifune. Certainly bold of you to fight your way through so many enemies. The calm, precise attacks that unquestionably cut off their movements, yet don't deprive them of their lives. As expected of me on Sonozaki. If you're that impressed, why not come closer? Instead of standing petrified over there like a scarecrow. Don't be absurd. However, it is one of my principles to show respect for outstanding opponents, even enemies. I'll take you up on that if the opportunity arises. Ha! That opportunity might come knocking before you know it. After saying that, Miss Sonozaki took a look around. Among the men in black, only one was still standing. The man called Mifune must not have expected her to take care of so many minions on her own. His eyes were open wide in shock. And on top of that, after such an extraordinary battle, she wasn't even out of breath. Huh? Ran up? Coward. Mifune spat out in disgust, then turned and ran. After that, the one remaining man in black approached Miss Sonozaki with his teeth chattering, armed with a wooden sword. Guess this means you're alone, huh? Miss Sonozaki held her sword towards the man. Then, I'm sorry. He must have realised what we already knew. He tossed his wooden sword aside and dropped down to his knees, rubbing his forehead in the ground. He gave an all too soon, and brought this confrontation to a miserable end. Please forgive me, please, I'm begging you. What are you trying to pull? I was an idiot. It was shallow of me to turn my blade on Mion Sonozaki, the true head of the family. It was inexcusable, but I'm begging you, have mercy. Please, forgive me. Miss Sonozaki looked down at the man for a while, before letting out a dejected sigh, and then she lowered the sword she was holding. Very well. Life is precious, after all. Thank you very much. Thank you. The man in black continued, exaggeratedly rubbing his forehead against the ground. I felt like I was watching the same scene over and over. After coldly glaring at that pathetic plea for mercy, Miss Sonozaki turned away. That was amazing, Miss Sonozaki. Thank goodness, Mion. I'm glad you're... Just after he muttered that... Huh? Miss Sonozaki's body shook as the gunshot ran out. Miss Sonozaki? If I hadn't been running just a step behind her, I probably wouldn't have been able to catch her. I reached for the banding around her kimono sash, struggling to support her body as her head helplessly collapsed into my shoulder, and her bright white socks were stained deep red. At the same time, She coughed out a pile of blood, dyeing my shirt deep red. Looking back, the man in black who should have been begging on the ground was pointing a gun straight at her. You're too soft. That's why you're unfit to be the next head. Bastard. Life is precious. Don't make me laugh. That weak attitude is unfit for a gangster. We live in a kill or be killed world. Bastard. Her face was quickly going pale, and her breathing sounded far more fragile than earlier. It seemed like it pained her just leaving her throat. The man in black watched her agonizing expression and smiled. Like mother, like daughter. Both falling for the same trick. I immediately understood what he meant by that. It's him. The man who carried out Mifune's orders and shot Miss Sonozaki's mother, Akane, was standing right before us now. Before us right now. I know how to speak. How dare you? Huh? When Otobe tried to rush out in anger, Miss Sonozaki used all the strength in her body to pull him back. Mion? I'll settle this on my own. It's already been settled. Let the gun that killed your mother perform the last rites. Wouldn't it be great to have something else in common with her? The man in black once again held the gun up with his finger on the trigger, and the muzzle was aimed straight at her chest. Demons belong beyond the gates of hell. Die, Mion Sonozaki. The finger holding the trigger moved. A bullet burst from the gun and flew straight towards Miss Sonozaki. It was like watching it in slow motion. Miss Sonozaki didn't stir. She waited there as the lead-coloured bullet approached. I could see the approaching bullet reflected in her clear eyes, under her long, glossy eyelashes, and then... Ah! She pushed herself away from my body with surprising strength, took katana in hand, and swung down vertically in a flash. I heard a dull sound. It was like witnessing a miracle. Nobody could say a word. The bullet fired by the man in black was split in two. I love that trope so much, I really do. Then a flash of light emanated from the sword. The man in black bent backwards and fell to the ground on the spot. Miss Sonozaki approached him as he lay in an unsightly pose on the ground, with her footsteps swaying as she went. Then she kicked aside with her toe, but the man in black didn't move at all. The sword. I'm told that ancient warriors used this sword in battle to slice through bullets. This was simply a normal sword she would have won. He didn't respond. Was he even able to hear what she said? There was no way to know. Otobe and I were both absolutely dumbfounded. That's why it's called the Tamahajiki, or orb-repelling sword, or void orb wall. It doesn't simply repel bullets, it slices them in half. Miss Sonozaki noticed Otobe and I staring, and turned to each of us in turn with a reassuring smile. But as soon as she did, her body began to sway and she fell to her knees. Miss Sonozaki? However, she gripped the handle of her sword like a cane, and used it to climb to her feet. Then she began walking to the exterior hallway of the main building. No, it might be more accurate to say she advanced at a crawling pace. The bright red blood splattered on her body left faint trails in her wake. Mion! It can't be. Never in my life had I encountered a scene that so perfectly suited the word gruesome. Even after spilling so much blood, she was still pressing on. An ordinary person wouldn't even be conscious under these circumstances, much less still moving around. She was far too persistent. Miss Sonozaki was desperately trying to prevent the Sonozaki family from splitting apart and withering. That's enough. You gave everything you had and did all you could. You can leave the rest to me. Inside my heart, yes, I was saying as much to her. And yet, she showed no signs of ceasing her crawl forward. That was her strength, her willpower. Mion, please stop moving. Tobe cried out, clung to her back, hoping to hold her reckless advance, and then he grabbed her by the hand. Tobe, sorry. Could I ask you a small favour? Huh? Her hands were trembling and stained red with blood. She clutched the handle of the sword in her hands, then gently held it out towards Otobe. With this sword, the bell. Mion. Her words sounded distant, but I could hear them clearly. Everything until now was to bring the Tamahajiki sword here. And now she's entrusting it to Otobe. She no longer had the strength to do it herself. Mion. Sonozaki held the handle in her bloody hands and placed it in Otobe's hand. Then he held his breath and listened to her speak. My sister will arrive here soon. She looks just like me, so you'll know her right away. Give her the bell. Mion, please don't say anything more. I understand. It'll be all right. Sorry for giving you such a troubling task in my last moments. Believe me, we'll find that bell and give it to your sister. I promise. Thank you. I have one more favour to ask. Her voice was getting faint and harder to hear. Toby brought his ear close to her lips to make sure he didn't miss anything. But just then, we're in deep shit. It didn't sound like a siren. That's not a police car. Another wave of enemies from the Sonozaki group. I dashed over to the gate and closed the door just by the skin of my teeth. We'd hear gunshots coming from the other side, but the walls were far too thick to be penetrated easily. That should buy us some time. But even so, I could hear the sound of many footsteps echoing, and someone was barking out orders. Angry, violent shouts full of murderous intent. If we don't make it to the secret passage, they're going to kill us. Arakawa, please go. What are you saying? I'll get the bell. Otobe clutched the bloody sword and rose to his feet. Miss Sonozaki was no longer moving. That fact shocked me so hard my whole body froze for a moment. But there was no longer any time to waste on sentimentality. There's no way you can do it. Another batch of enemies is on the way. We need to escape as soon as... Please go. What about you? Otobe shook his head and bit his lip. Then he put strong will into words that came overflowing from his lips. Mion put her life on the line in order to accomplish this, and when she couldn't do it, she entrusted it to me. I want to carry out her last request, no matter what it takes. Mion believed in me, so I have to pay her back. Otobe. I understood how much it pained Otobe. For the longest time he wanted to know, why was he here? Why was he born? They had only known each other for a single night, but humans do embrace a feeling akin to respect when another human being places their trust in them. How heavily did that weigh on Otobe? I gazed into his eyes, then firmly nodded. He nodded back, then ran towards the back room. Then I turned my eyes towards the gate once more. The harsh sound of heavy impacts against the door echoed through the room. They were likely to break through any moment now. My senses have gotten a lot sharper since I came here. What have I been doing in the city all this time? While walking through life as a writer, somewhere along the way I lost faith in my own talents. When things didn't go well, I'd get desperate. I managed to get by passing myself as a popular writer, but I've worried over and over whether it was the right thing for me. Many times now, I've wondered if I could have another life. However, I was shown that those sorts of worries were nothing more than calculations for living a good life. By Miss Sonozaki's tenacity. If all human beings are born to fulfill some purpose, then I want to serve my purpose as well. There's no need to search for what that is. There's no need to hesitate, to fret over which way is right or worry about what would be easiest. I'll just face the things in front of me with all my strength. If my lifestyle is what enables me to do that, then it must have been fate that brought me to Hinamizawa. Using my father's Hinamizawa interview tapes gave me a foothold that allowed me to step forward. And thanks to the people I met here, my eyes have opened. How can I leave the village that evoked these feelings in me without doing something to return the favour? Give a sneeze. I'm sure I can keep being an occult writer from now on. Pardon me. But instead of just piling up hatred and resentment, I'll put the breath of the people who lived here and their ways of life into words and chronicle on their behalf. I'll write about Hinamizawa, and I'll find a second and third Hinamizawa out there. I've decided. The only reason I even had the opportunity to and resolve to consider all this was Mion Sonozaki. It was you. She entrusted us with a wish, and we're going to carry it out, even if it means putting our lives on the line. It's come to this, then I'll strengthen my own resolve too. Toby, wait up! I started running towards the back room. I reached the back room in no time at all. The sliding door was wide open. When I quietly looked inside, I saw a white-haired man dressed in a kimono, standing at the doorway with a gun in hand. That man must be Mifune, and his gun was pointed towards the floor at Otobe. A wool scroll was lying on the floor, with a scabbard resting underneath. The Tamahajiki sword was inside the scabbard, and beyond the scroll was a cupboard with its doors open wide. Otobe was grasping a heavy nickel bell in his hand. That's the bell! Suddenly, Mifune noticed me and turned back. This is no place for amateurs. You hand it over quietly, I'll pretend I didn't see anything. Otobe turned towards the wall scroll instead of looking back at him, and his body was trembling. The shiny black muzzle of Mifune's gun filled the room with a tense atmosphere, knowing that he could fire at any moment. Otobe! My pathetically quiet voice quivered in fear. Let me have it. But I didn't have the courage to say that. Just give him the bell, Otobe. If you hand it over, your life will be spared. I could just say that, all this tension could be released, but I didn't have the nerve to say it. Now, Mifune was standing in the room with his muzzle aimed directly at Otobe. Even if I tried to persuade him, if I speak up now, I'll be his new target. If that were to happen, I'd be completely at his mercy. But if not, I'd simply be an outsider. In other words, I can still continue being just a bystander at this stage. It's important to be safe, and it'll all be over for nothing if he dies, so just give him the bell. Isn't it absurd to throw your life away on behalf of a woman you only just met yesterday? You have to recognise what's important. This isn't the place to abandon your life. I finally turned my eyes towards Otobe, continuing to persuade him in my mind. Toss him the bell and run, Otobe. No! He slowly turned and looked at me. Not Mifune. The person he chose to face was me. I was probably even more surprised by his courage than Mifune was. Otobe. Can friendship bloom, even on a battlefield? How long does it take to grow? At the very least, it doesn't matter when we first met. What matters is how deeply he was able to impact my life. Even people I'd known for over 10 years I'd be able to sweep aside. But Otobe was different. Whether or not to continue associating with him wasn't the problem. He's the ultimate coward. Couldn't even kill himself. Says us, also extremely cowardly. But I might be really starting to like the guy. Couldn't just consider his lifestyle none of my business. Even I struggled with whether to change jobs or how I was going to live my life in the future. Balancing the two of us and the scales of self-interest, I came to Hinamizawa looking for a convenient answer, while he came here to commit suicide. Just how different were we? But he was determined to protect the bell with his life, so I'll support him. Decided, going to overcome my own weakness. That's what Miss Sonozaki was telling me. The important thing isn't the end result, what excuses you make or how cool you look. What's truly important is to face the things you value head on. Is that so? Then it can't be helped. You want to follow that woman? I uttered a bizarre cry and leapt out at him Mifune without hesitation. Ugh. Surprised by my unconventional battle cry, I was able to get in close with a desperate attack and smack the gun out of his hand. It rolled down to the tatami floor. Tobe, grab that and run. Hurry! Bastard! Mifune mercilessly punched me in the jaw. He was far stronger than he looked. My beautiful glasses were blown right off, and the pain ran through my nose as it started to bleed. But my will didn't weaken. In fact, it grew stronger, so I clung to Mifune. Once I got a hold of him, I sunk my teeth into the old, frail skin of his neck. This was no longer a struggle. It was a legitimate fight. What is with this guy? Run! Run! Arakawa! After witnessing that, I finally decided to start running. However, in addition to the handgun by his feet, Mifune had another gun hidden in his other hand. Damn it! Mifune used all the strength in his body to smack me in the forehead with the gun barrel. I felt dizzy and the world around me grew dark. Tobe? Try to run, but what's this? My body can't move. I fell down to my knees and used both my hands to support my body on the floor. I have to keep going. I have to protect Tobe. However, Both my arms were too weak to support my body, so I fell face down on the floor. Harukawa? Now, hand over the bell. Otobe stood still, clutching the bell in his hand. Run, Otobe. Harukawa! The moment Mifune pulled the trigger, his whole body shook violently. Then, Mifune bent back and collapsed to his knees on the ground. What? Standing behind Mifune was a woman dressed in a kimono, holding her katana. Actual Mion, I think. The woman who should have been dead. Mion Sonozaki. Dun dun dun. No, I'm convinced that the person before was Shion and this is Mion. But even though I guess they look the same, it's the fact that the hair and also the fact that this Mion looks more like the Mion we met in the hospital as the detectives. Anyway, final chapter, lads. Fune? Sonozaki had a katana in hand and her mouth was stained red with blood. Mifune was collapsed on the floor, not moving at all. Mion! Mion, you're safe! Thank goodness! Really, I'm so glad. Miss Sonozaki? In my hazy state of consciousness, I could see her strong-willed eyes gazing down at me. Her expression was cold, cruel, like she was looking down at a lesser being, with an aloof glimmer in her eyes. That's not quite it. If anything, it was the callous gaze of someone looking at a total stranger. Mrs. Sonozaki? How dare you? Just then, several men in black suits came into the room all at once. These must be the reinforcements Mifune called earlier. Oh, you just have to do it. Miss Sonozaki readied her katana. In the blink of an eye, a dozen men in black rushed into the back room. When they saw Mifune collapsed by the doorway, the flames of hatred burnt in their eyes. Boss? How dare you hurt the boss? Jackasses won't get off easy for this. Miss Sonozaki said nothing in response. She just continued gently looking forward, with her hand on the sword. Huh? Something's different. I don't know what it is, but something is different. Let's go. Get down. The very moment the men in black gave their signal, Miss Sonozaki turned back to us. So we followed her order. Almost that exact moment, the men in black fired at us all at once. Miss Sonozaki reached for the scroll on the floor, tossed it at the men in the back to disrupt their firing, then hid in the gap between the back room sliding door. Don't let them escape. Kill them all. Ow, sorry for the flashing. The men in black started firing indiscriminately. However, terrible handiwork. You're wasting your bullets. Miss Sonozaki emerged from behind the sliding door to strike at them one by one. Over here, heads up. Come on, aim better. Just as I thought, something was definitely different. Her fighting style was different. Her atmosphere was different. But I couldn't understand why. The next moment, as I stared at Miss Sonozaki and pondered that, something cold suddenly pressed against me. The barrel of the gun. Just as I looked back, I heard the click of a trigger being drawn. Oh no. Huh? But when the gunshot rang out, the man in black was the one blown away. Ryunosuke, are you alright? When I looked in that direction, the person holding the gun was Miyuki. Miyuki? She rushed over to me with her smoking gun still in hand. Then she held the gun up and aimed at the men in black one by one, as if to shield me. The flashing makes my eyes hurt too, don't worry. Ryunosuke, head that way. Right. Miyuki thrust me away and continued fighting back. Then the gunshots grew even more intense. The number of bullets in flight escalated in a flash, and Miyuki wasn't the only one responsible for that. After a quick look, I noticed several men dressed in suits. Every last one of them must have been a police officer. The men in black and the police officers were having an intense gunfight. Honestly, the police officers seemed shocked that the situation required so much gunfire. If ordinary people like Hitobe and I poked our heads out, we'd be shot in an instant. The spectacle was fit to be called a battlefield. After cutting off their movements, Miyuki boldly rushed over towards the men in black. Bullets struck the ground by her feet and bounced across the tatami floor. But Miyuki courageously pushed forward, skillfully took cover, and fired her pistol several times. Could have nothing low life stand a chance. Miyuki? It's hard to imagine that trash talk coming from someone with a face like hers. When I looked more carefully, I noticed that none of the bullets that she and her cohorts were firing struck in positions that would cause fatal injuries. That precision shooting was to be expected of true professionals. An unskilled opponent would simply kill them, but an expert can cut off their movements. It sounded like reciting phrases from some book, but Miss Sonozaki and Miyuki deserve to be called experts. Door, close it! Got it! My eyes were fixated on Miyuki's magnificent battle as she roared that out. I rushed to close the sliding door, but was it really alright to leave her there alone? Hitobe ducked into the corner next to me to escape the bullet storm. Then I noticed a kimono sleeve right next to him. It was Miss Sonozaki. What about your injury? Miss Sonozaki? Who are you? Eh? No way, Arakawa. Ryunosuke Arakawa. What is this, some kind of joke? Ryunosuke Arakawa? I knew it. This Sonozaki was different somehow. What the hell? Could it be... Are you Mion's sister? Shion? Huh? As soon as Miss Sonozaki heard that name, she suddenly looked up. But the absent-minded gaze in her eyes gradually returned to normal. What's wrong? Shion, are you alright? Shion. I abandoned that name 20 years ago. How do you know that name? Huh? Who told you that name? And more importantly, what am I even doing here? Huh? It was our turn to be completely stunned. Oh my god, I'm so stupid. This is Shion body raised as Mion. I think. Did Miss Sonozaki lose her memory from the shock of being shot? Hitobe anxiously stared at her. He suddenly remembered she was holding the bell. Right, here you go. Mion said, Shion will definitely come here, and told me to give this to you. Mion? Don't be ridiculous. This sister's been dead for over 20 years. What is that supposed to mean? Huh? Wait a minute. Hitobe and I turned to one another. After all, Mion Sonozaki was already dead. But if that was the case, then who was the woman standing before us that looked just like Mion Sonozaki? Hitobe, could it be that the person we met was actually a ghost? Cut it out, Arakawa. This is no time to be making weird jokes. Take a look. She has legs. Hitobe slowly backed away from the woman that looked like Miss Sonozaki. Indeed, she did have legs, but there were no traces of the massive blood flow draining from her chest earlier, and her feet should have been stained black from stepping through pools of blood, but her skin was clear and oddly beautiful. What's the meaning of this? I don't know. What on earth is this? Ah! Just then Miss Shion gasped and looked up like she'd remembered something. That's right. I was guided to Hinamizawa by my sister. The night before last, I had a hard time sleeping. I tossed and turned, falling asleep and waking up over and over, until suddenly I felt someone by my bedside and opened my eyes. It was my sister. Mion was standing there. Shion, go to Hinamizawa. What? Sis, what do you mean? What's in Hinamizawa? If you go, you'll understand. What you need right now can be found there. You want everyone to recognize you as the Sonozaki successor, don't you? How did you... My eyes were open wide in shock as I went to ask Mion for more information. However, Mion just flashed me a beaming smile and said, "Good luck," before vanishing into my dreams. Mion and everyone else died, and then the Great Hinamizawa disaster occurred. Naturally, I was hospitalized for a while to cope with the mental shock. However, Keiichi Maebara died shortly after that, which only made my mental state deteriorate even further. The curse of Oyashiro-sama killed Keiichi too. That means the next target of the curse is me? Is the curse going to kill me, just like him? Am I going to die? The fear of that invisible threat continued to plague me every single night. It got so bad the doctors had even given up on me. Naturally, people tried to seize the opportunity and a conflict developed within the family. After Mion's death, we used the chaos of the subsequent great disaster to successfully replace her with me. In other words, we told everyone Shion was the one who died, but... Oh my gosh. So... I was right. That was Shion-bodied person who was the ghost. No? No, this is the person who was raised Shion. No. Oh my god, I hate these twins, it's so confusing. But I was still in an unhealthy state. So those people started complaining that even I wasn't fit to be the successor. Of course, my parents stubbornly refused to listen, but it was annoying having no strength to convince them otherwise. It was during that time that Sis appeared before me. At first I ran away screaming and crying, constantly begging for forgiveness. "Don't kill me. Help me. No, I don't want to die. I'm sorry. But when I was like that, Sis, Mion, quietly spoke to me. "Mom and Dad will help you. So hurry and wake up, Mion Sonozaki." "Is that Sis just now? You're Mion now. So what are you doing shivering and clinging to your knees in a place like this? I know that it's selfish. I'm well aware that it will cause you even more pain. But only you can do this. Sis, so let me return the name Mion to you. Please, Mion, take my place." At that point in time, Shion died, and I brought Mion back to this world. At any rate, I believed it had to have been some sort of revelation and decided to head to Hinamizawa by myself the next day. But I guess my movements were being monitored. I was attacked by one of Mifune's cars along the way. Still, even with them giving chase, I managed to get away. Shit. My car crashed through the guardrail and plunged to the bottom of the valley. Fortunately, I landed close to Hinamizawa, and thanks to the abundant foliage, I was able to avoid any major injuries, but the shock of the fall did cause me to faint. Then, could it be the person around us all this time was actually Shion, possessed by Mion's spirit? Seriously? Of course it's possible. This is Hinamizawa, after all. I admitted I can understand quite well why Otobe would have a hard time believing it. I'm so confused about which twin is which at this point, but I felt like I could believe it. This is Hinamizawa, the place where the dead dwell. Like that time with Ms. Tawara, and again with Otobe. It's not strange at all for things to happen that defy common sense. Actually, I just had another thought. So the reason that I was convinced that this was, like this, the person we're talking to now looks more like the Mion we met in the hospital. But that would make sense if by the time we as the detectives met her, it was going around that Shion had died and Mion was the lone survivor. Admitted, so when we were visiting them in the hospital, that was from a different... When we as the detectives visited Mion in the hospital, that was from a different, like, cycle. But I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happened this time around. Especially given that it's Arakawa's daughter, who Miyuki is Arakawa's daughter, I believe. I said Arakawa, I meant Akasaka. The names are like similar enough that it trips me up. That's right. Mion Sonozaki died over 20 years ago in the school hostage incident. But even though her body was destroyed, her heart never died. One of the reasons her soul lingered in this world was to protect her sister. For those with a strong will, a powerful impression is left behind even in death. The persistence Mion Sonozaki showed even after death. After witnessing that, I felt I could understand how her heart could remain even after her body was destroyed. Miss Sonozaki knew that it would be a major affair to unify the family. That's why she called you to Hinamizawa. She sent you to find the heirloom necessary to succeed the Sonozaki family. She was trying to show you that the bell was here. Sis. She let out a long sigh and gazed off into the distance. Sis was always like that. She was always concerned about other people. Even though they should have the same physical body, her face and tone of voice seemed slightly different from when she was Mion Sonozaki. Felt odd that the presence of
Kyle has.
Fuck. No.
And that's gonna be hurtful. I think that's more important to foster that relationship.
I'm so sorry, guys.
With Kyle, because he really depends on you. Yeah. I don't think you can just...
I've been listening to podcasts all day. I knew it was going to happen. I was just waiting for it. I've been listening to podcasts all day, including, as you could probably just tell, my brother and me. And Stitcher is doing this fun thing where it starts itself at random, and I can't tell why or when or what I've done that causes it. So, it's in the middle of class earlier in Stitcher, in the middle of a talk, Stitcher, etc. I wasn't sure if Otobe was thinking something similar, but he was staring intently at Miss Sonozaki, and he carefully examined her whole body. But as soon as he looked at her chest, his complexion completely changed. Sorry, Shion. Is your wound alright? Wound? What? The bullet definitely struck her close to the heart, and there was still a burn mark left behind on the kimono. That's right. The bullet should have struck near her heart. This... She rested a hand on the bullet hole. It's truly a miracle that she survived. If Sis wasn't here, I would have died. Shion Sonozaki's consciousness was completely absent while she was under Mion Sonozaki's possession. And it's unbelievable, but while Mion Sonozaki was in control, she even shouldered the burden of the wounds on her body. As long as Mion Sonozaki was possessing that body, Mion was the one in danger of getting hurt, so Shion Sonozaki was left unscathed. Which is why she came out unhurt. That's amazing. As long as you have your sister's spirit, you're invincible? No, that's no longer the case. Miss Sonozaki turned to me with longing eyes and groaned while shaking her head. Then she turned to gaze downward with a lonely look on her face. At this point, my sister is truly dead. That wasn't the first time she appeared to me in my dreams. And even beyond that, I was always able to feel her presence somehow. But I don't feel it any longer. Somehow I know Sis is truly gone. Shion. Mion Sonozaki is gone. I'm certain we'll never see her again. Sis was always keeping watch over me, and she played such an important role in my place. But thanks to this wound, she finally vanished. That's what I feel. Miss Sonozaki gently stroked the bell she received from Otobe with her fingers. It felt like she was trying to express her love and gratitude for Mion Sonozaki through her fingertips, and display her resolve to protect the Sonozaki family with that bell. Follow them. Don't let them escape. Sorry. I could hear the boisterous shouts of the police officers coming from the garden. It grew quiet in the back room immediately after that. When I gently opened the sliding door, I found only Miyuki on the other end, handcuffing the men in black one by one. Dropping a save. The detectives were chasing after several more men in black who fled to the garden. I'll leave the rest to you. Miyuki called out to the police officers beside her, then handed them the handcuffed men in black off to the other detectives, who escorted them out of the back room, one by one. It seemed like everything had already wrapped up without me realizing it. Miyuki? Ryunosuke, you injured? Is that blood? Miyuki rushed over to me to make sure I was alright. As I wiped away the blood running down my nose with my fingertips, She grabbed my cheek with both her hands and peered at my face. A lot has happened since I first met her yesterday morning, but seeing her in front of me like this, she looked really cute. I'm sorry I had to put you through this. Should have gotten here earlier. It's alright. I was totally fine. More importantly, I'm sorry about all this. I wish we could have straightened everything out before you got here, Miyuki. What are you talking about? Isn't this exactly the sort of situation you should rely on the power of the state for? Miyuki flashed a friendly smile. Her smiling face seemed to soothe all my pain and weariness. All the muscles in my body loosened up, and I felt comfortable enough that I wouldn't even regret it if I died here. I wasn't sure if my feelings were able to get through to her, but she looked back at me with a huge smile. Miyuki, about that promise. Huh? I continued to stammer as she gazed at me. She looked like she was just waiting for the words to come out, but I suddenly started to feel embarrassed and turned away. What am I doing acting like some naive middle school boy? Don't forget how old you are. Well, that's alright. At any rate, being good friends seemed like a nice place to start. Anyway. Inosuke, what's wrong? You alright? She held my hand tight while firmly gazing into my eyes. Is that hand holding an invitation? You idiot. You fool idiot. Miyuki. Inosuke. What are you doing with my daughter? I heard a gruff voice coming from behind and quickly let go of Miyuki's hand. When I turned in that direction, a tall, slender man, dressed in a suit, put a hand on Miyuki's shoulder and stared at me over his shoulder. Matt! Hello there, I'm her father. His frightening eyes were glaring straight at me, causing me to freeze up for a totally different reason this time. This is hair-raising. Are you Akazaka? I remember now. I'm certain that was the detective from the Metropolitan Police Department that I met while investigating the Hinamizawa tapes my father left behind. Akazaka seems to have changed a bit since I first met him. It's like he was more dignified, solemn, awe-inspiring and refined. But what was he doing in Hinamizawa again? Are you Arakawa? That's right. Oh, it's you? And here I thought you were some daredevil making a pass on my daughter. I'm sorry, forgive my rudeness. He seemed to grin broadly as soon as he recognised me. Akazaka, you may say that, but could you suppress that bloodlust that could kill any insect if it got too close to you? Tag? You know Ryunosuke? You could say that. Ryunosuke? About that. I desperately tried to evade his questioning. Please let me out of here. Miyuki's eyes were opened wide in a daze as she watched all this. Well, I visited the neighbouring town of Okonomiya several times while investigating the great Hinamizawa disaster. I met Arakawa a few times to discuss some old Hinamizawa-related tapes that he brought with him. Is that so? It seems like you've been doing investigating of your own, just like your father. But even so, try not to work yourself too hard. Okay. I tried to give a suitable retort. But the truth is, my father actually met Akazaka too. When my father interviewed the survivor of the great Hinamizawa disaster who predicted he would drown to death, he started to grow interested in the disaster itself, and during that investigation, the two of them got to know one another. According to my father's investigation notes, Akazaka claimed that a resident of Hinamizawa predicted his wife's death. So meeting up with Akazaka, whom my father met during his own investigation in Hinamizawa, felt like an act of fate. My father was a splendid reporter, but you can be even better than him. I'm not like my father. All I'm doing is walking through life trying not to embarrass myself. Akazaka must have thought those comments were exceedingly pure for a man in his 30s like me. That's why he bitterly smiled. There was a gentle warmth in his eyes. It's a small world. Well, if I could connect you via Dad instead of that publishing company, I probably would have met you sooner. What do you mean, Miyuki? It was Dad you keep mentioning. Huh? Oh, this is my father. Phil, bitch idiot! Nothing like, not at all. Akazaka didn't look so bad himself. Huh? Two of them really are father and daughter? Arakawa certainly is a fine young man, but wouldn't your husband be in tears if he knew you were running around with other men? What are you saying? Don't be stupid. Besides, don't you have things to take care of? Alright, later then. Akasaka let out a small smile and bowed to me, then walked off in the direction of Mifune's corpse. No, more importantly, Akasaka said something really important just now, didn't he? What was that about, husband? Just my father being obnoxious. No, you're Akasaka's daughter, but your last name is Sorimachi. That's right. I changed my name when I got married. My father and I are both detectives. And on top of that, my husband is a detective too. We're a weird family. What? Miyuki lightly smiled as she said that. I, on the other hand, couldn't laugh about it. Miyuki was married this whole time? My shock must have been plain to see. Miyuki deeply lowered her head and said, "I'm sorry," several times in a row. I don't have a boyfriend, but I do have a husband. First I was just playing a joke on you, but I never really had an opportunity to come clean about it. Sounds like she was planning to drop that "actually I'm married" on me at some point, have a good laugh at my expense. But up until now we never really had a moment to relax. The timing just wasn't appropriate to reveal it and laugh at the "what, really?" reaction. Ryunosuke, is there a chance that you... She said that. Miyuki looked terribly distraught, afraid to face me directly. She wasn't trying to lead me around, but she seems terribly upset that she might have carelessly hurt me. Well, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Still, her intentions weren't malicious, so it was my duty as a man to make things easier on her. Probably? Nothing like that. I'm just surprised to learn that you're Akasaka's daughter, Miyuki. It really is a small world. So really, there's nothing for you to be worried about. Really? Really? Thank goodness. Miyuki flashed me a big grin. I had no choice but to nod to her with a vague smile. Goodbye, my innocent love. Well, it's not like it really began in the first place. Ah, this is bad. I'll cause trouble if you guys stay here, so why don't you get going, Ryunosuke? Uh-huh. I've got a lot to do here, so I won't be able to head back today. Leave everything to the police from here on out. Miyuki pushed me by the back, trying to get me to drive away. It'd certainly be a bother to stick around in a place where police are conducting on-site investigations and interrogations. At that point, I realised that Miss Sonozaki and Otobe had long since disappeared. Alright, later, Miyuki. Ryunosuke, thanks. For everything. Miyuki deeply bowed her head. I lightly lowered my head in response, then headed out of the back room. Once I reached the gate, I took one more look towards the back room, and saw Miyuki standing on the side, smiling and waving to me as she watched me head out. I was a little out of touch or slow on the subject of romance, and I was led astray, but yeah, she's a good girl. I'll send her an email next time I have an opportunity. I'm proud to consider her a friend who endured the situation without falling into a bad relationship. Several patrol cars were parked outside the gate. So which way did they go? For now, I decided to walk in the direction that I came from. Before long, I found Otobe and Sonozaki sitting on a big stone by the side of the road, waiting for me. Otobe, Miss Sonozaki. I ran towards them. Then, a familiar girl came walking this way from the other end of the street. Miss Tawada, I'm glad you're safe. You too, Otobe. Most important thing is that everyone is safe. Otobe grabbed Miss Tawada's hand and gave her a huge smile to celebrate that they were both alive. Oh, Miss Sonozaki, let me return the gun you lent me. Thank you very much. Oh, sure. Miss Tawada handed the gun she borrowed from Mion over to Shion. Shion seemed a bit confused, but she decided to leave it at that, since a proper explanation would have taken far too long. Then, once we realised that Miss Tawada came to see us off, we all turned towards her. That's right. Miss Tawada, what are you planning to do from here on? After everyone left, I faced Takumi and came to a decision. It's time to start over and live a new life. And in order to make things right, I'm going to turn myself in. Really? Same here. I think I'm ready to start a new life. I'll find a way to repay my debts. I'll talk things over with my parents properly. If I search hard enough, I'm sure I'll be able to find a path forward. Probably won't be easy, but decided. I'm not going to run away anymore. Life is like a tube of toothpaste. You have to squeeze every last drop out of it. I thought back on what Mion said earlier. I certainly agree with that assessment. Rather than hesitating, the best choice at any given time is to simply do whatever you can. Oh, Arakawa, after I've cleaned everything up, would you consider hiring me as your assistant? Don't be stupid, I'm not nearly that important. Huh? I was lying about being a famous writer. It's not true. I can hardly make the rent on my rundown apartment. I was even thinking of giving up the writing business. Seriously? I scratched my head. His dramatic reaction was a little embarrassing. Well, I'm half kidding. But if there's one thing I've learnt, it's that I've really come to appreciate you, Misawa. Truth is, after everything that's happened, I've started to like it. Regardless of everything else, I heard the voice of the dead for the first time ever. I was probably taking it too easy. I just half-assed work, only caring if I was having fun, so I don't know what the future has in store for me. But I won't hesitate any longer. It seems like I finally managed to find my way. I've also come to a conclusion. I'm certain that the spirits of the dead persist even when the body is destroyed. Sometimes they need to borrow a body of a human to carry out their will. I'm glad I met all of you, and I think I'll keep going with this line of work. Someday, I really will be able to say that I'm a famous writer and actually mean it. Arakawa. Well, feel free to contact me if that day ever arrives. Although the pay isn't great and the job demands a lot of running around. Got it. But I'll have to give up on this story. Between the Yakuza power struggle and the dead crying and apologising to the living, the Weekly 7 would never publish this. My head is starting to hurt from just thinking about what to do with this. Tobe quietly chuckled. So he can smile like this. Tobe had a bright, youthful smile on his face. Then Mr. Wada bowed her head to us, before heading out to see Miyuki. After watching her confidently walk off, the rest of us turned to one another and quietly nodded. You guys are a long way from town. I'll drop you off there. Along with Shion's voice, I heard the sound of a car horn. A black car had pulled up right behind us without me even realising it. Miss Shion got out of there, and a man whose appearance betrayed his aura walked over to us as if guiding her. Sensing his power, I braced myself for a moment. Oh, this is Kasai. Don't worry about him. Yes, ma'am. Couldn't help but give an overly formal response. What am I doing? Then we climbed into the elegant car, and Kasai drove us down a straight road leading to the village. Tobe quickly fell asleep. He must have felt relieved. I idly gazed out the window. Then at the foot of the mountains, a massive pile of rubble came into view. What is that? Looks like the ruins of some collapsed building. It's the remains of a school. It's been left untouched since the explosion during the hostage incident. Kasai, could you stop here? Jesus. Kasai seemed to completely understand. He parked the car along the side of the ruins, then opened the rear passenger door. Shion slowly emerged from the car and let out a deep sigh. This is where everyone died. I lost my sister, my friends, and everything in that incident over 20 years ago. The only survivors were myself and the boy Sis liked. But even he died shortly afterwards. That's why I thought I should have died with them in the explosion that day. All this time I thought I was left alone. Always. But Shion forlornly gazed on as the wind blew through the mountain of rubble. She become tormented the last 20 years by the lonely thought that she was the one left behind. She abandoned the name Shion and lived her life as Mion Sonozaki to protect the Sonozaki family. Enduring that for all this time must have been so painful. Your sister once told us, life is like a tube of toothpaste. You have to squeeze every last drop out of it. Sis said that? Sounds like something she'd say. Otobe came crawling out of the car. Shion's beaming laughter must have woken him up. Shion seemed lost in thought while gazing at his face. Then, once he came closer, she patted him on the head. Hey, Shion? Live your life unwaveringly. I'll do the same, even if every day is full of blood and gunpowder. Otobe suddenly seemed to be embarrassed about a woman stroking his head. His face turned red. When Shion saw that, she quietly muttered to herself. Looks so much like Satoshi. Huh? It's nothing. Shion turned away from us and gazed at the school while playing with her hair and her fingertips. For a moment there, you reminded me of an old friend. There's a bit of a resemblance. How would I describe him? Yeah, he was a good guy. So did this Satoshi guy also pass away in this instance? Oh right, that's enough idle chatter. With this spell, I can end the conflict in an instant. And I need to settle the score with those Oumi punks who tried to take advantage of all this chaos. Although it may still be a while longer until my work is complete. Shion whispered that, then turned back this way. The face of the person who'd muttered Satoshi had completely vanished. Shion, what is it? If you take too long, I'll leave you behind. Shion, there's something I absolutely must tell you here, before leaving Hinamizawa. The very last thing Mion said to me. She wanted you to hear this, Shion. Uh-huh. She stopped in her tracks. I have one more favour to ask. I recalled the moment just before Mion Sonozaki's death, when she requested something of Otobe. Come to think of it, what did she ask him? Mion said, I hope we can be twins again next time. That's what she wanted you to hear. Hang in there, Mion. I'll do my best, Shion. Yeah, thanks, Shion. Do your best, Mion. If you run into any trouble, feel free to consult with me at any time. That's how it's always been for us, and that'll never change. Yeah. That's seriously what you choose to say at the bitter end? Even though she helped out back then, she's always butting in where she doesn't belong, treating me like a child. I'm an adult now, you know? Much older than you were. Seriously, can't believe your last words were something so naive. And the word next made me sad, because you reminded me that you're already gone. I wasn't interested in reminiscing about the old days. I wanted to talk about those memories with you. I wanted to keep you by my side forever, sis. Tears started to well up in Shion's eyes. Shion. How could you say something so obvious? Shion pulled the Tamahajuki sword out from its sheath and thrust the blade into the ground near the former school building. Thanks, sis. Then she turned and didn't look back. Somewhere among the ruins, a single playing card fluttered in the wind. That card probably dated back to the days when me and Sonozaki played at the school. The playing card gently fell to the ground, nestled next to the sword. Thanks, Sonozaki. And farewell, Hinamizawa. Then I too started walking without looking back. The playing card definitely makes me think were the events of oh my god, what's the name? The events at the end of the Tsukio Toshi arc. I definitely think they occurred at the end of the Great Hinamizawa disaster, with the detectives interviewing Mion Shion. All the while, swearing in my heart that I'd never look back on the past. Otobe and Mr. Wada had already started walking forward. The car Kasai drove us here and slowly descended the mountain path. Everyone here started walking towards their own separate future, all of us starting at a disadvantage. Otobe's future involved repaying a debt he could never pay off alone. Mr. Wada's future included being arrested and sent to prison. Ms. Sonozaki and Mr. Kasai's future involved fighting to protect the future of the Sonozaki group. My future is to start building something meaningful in my day-to-day life, while panicking about the uncertainty of tomorrow. None of us will have it easy in the future. Regardless, we'll keep walking forward, fighting alone against our fate for the right to say that we lived. I think arguably Arakawa has the easiest. Mion Sonozaki and Hinamizawa village. Farewell, and thank you. A refreshing blue sky was spread out beyond the mountains, shining the light of hope down on our future. see, it's like another, I guess, epilogue to the series, I guess, which is pretty neat. Tips are quiet. Unruly girl. Few new tips. But you're still just as unruly as ever. Don't you know how insane it is to jump into organised crime conflict alone? Honestly, the original plan was just to conduct reconnaissance, but things happened. Well, we did secure the target, so you can't argue with the results. Unbelievable. She may be my daughter, but sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong while raising her. Makes me feel uneasy. A boss and a husband would have pain in their gut if they knew the situation here. Ibuki won't be happy. He'll say something like, courage and good sense are admirable, but do something about that reckless side. Perhaps you could say that's fitting for an anti-organised crime detective, but who's to say you'll live that long if you keep charging in without thinking? Section Chief Ibuki is such a worrywart. You know the old saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Even so. Besides, I don't want to hear any of this from someone who voluntarily served at the head of Shock Corps, who charged into the mafia crime scenes time and time again. Wouldn't you agree, Assistant Commissioner Akasaka? I had no reputation for that. Moreover, even though she's the one who happily listened to those heroic exploits, it was none other than me who proudly told them to her. In other words, you reap what you sow. This is hard on Yuichi too. I feel like having a long talk with him about how he could fall in love with such an unruly girl. Back when we announced our engagement, weren't you the one who said you got a lot of guts with that terrifying look on your face? He still gets nightmares about it, apparently. It's natural for a father to feel that way for his daughter. If you ever become a parent, you'll understand the feeling. Yeah, whatever you say. Miyuki shrugged her shoulders with an apathetic look on her face, clearly not convinced. She was such a bashful little girl in the old days, but nowadays I can't see even a hint of that. In fact, over the years, it seems like she's become more and more like my wife. Seems like she's become more and more like my wife, Yukie. Honestly, so much like your mother. If she could see you now, she'd burst out crying in her grave. Dad, what are you talking about? You can't just kill Mum like that, even if you're joking around. I'm going to tell her later. That moment, I lost my voice, struggling to understand the meaning of what Miyuki just said. Did Miyuki just say, you can't kill her? Talking about her like she's still alive? Hey Miyuki, what did you just say? Oh, I just remembered. Just before leaving, Mum said to give you this medicine. Here you go. Enough of this, Dad. Even if it's a bottle when you run out of medicine, is it really so hard to go to the hospital? Mum knows you're busy, but she's really worried. What's wrong, Dad? Nothing. I stared down at the pill case Miyuki handed me while trying to sort out my jumbled thoughts. Possible. Can't be. First off, Yukie fell down the stairs and hit her head at the hospital just after giving birth to Miyuki. Since then, we spent the last 29 years living without her, struggling to conceal our loneliness and sorrow. So there's no way Yukie gave Miyuki this medicine. There's no chance that she's feeling worried about me. Wait a minute. Hold on. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding. Didn't I call Yukie early this morning? I told her I'll be home late, so a late night dinner would be best. Then Yukie laughed and responded, then I'll prepare some side dishes that can be warmed up quickly, didn't she? And then she ended the conversation by saying this. Please go on ahead. Huh? Dad, what's wrong? Oh. Then I suddenly came back to my senses. That's when I realised I was crying. Did something happen to Mum? No, it's nothing. Right, it's nothing. I turned to Miyuki, who was looking worried, and smiled at her while wiping the tears away with my fist. Then I slipped the pill case into my seat pocket, peeled out a tissue and blew my nose. Sorry, it's just a small case of allergies. Took some medicine earlier, but I guess it's pretty bad out here. Don't scare me like that. I was worried you two got into a big fight. Miyuki let out a huge sigh of relief. Even though her mouth has gotten sharper as she's grown, that gentle demeanour of hers hasn't changed at all. So I understood, all over again. That was the reason Sorimachi fell in love with Miyuki, why he proposed to her. Huh? it's about time for our guide to get here. The meeting spot is in front of the old bus stop near the entrance of Hinamizawa. In that case, I came from there a little while ago. I need to head back to the Frude Shrine, but I'll show you the way before that. Which car is yours, Dad? Oh, it's the second black one from the front. Well, what about your car, Miyuki? Oh, about that. I was searching for it a while ago and finally found it. The cargo bay was fine, but the tyres, door handle and all sorts of things were completely trashed. Even if I get it towed home, the repair costs are so high I might as well throw it away. What? Isn't that the new car you got just last month? You already wrecked it? What's more, she begged me for an expensive one, so I gave in and covered the down payment. She really scrapped her car in less than a month. I feel a headache coming on. Hey, Dad? You think I can claim damages against the Sonozaki group? Hell if I know. I love her. She's a good egg, that Miyuki. Right. Let us save. And that is the end of that, folks. I am going to say thank you very much for watching. It is very, very much appreciated, and I do hope that you enjoyed. I will be streaming Nier Replicant this Saturday. We are going to be taking our first steps into part 2. Then on Sunday it'll be Destiny 2, where we'll be continuing through the story of Season of the Splicer and working on some more challenges. Then next Tuesday it'll be Final Fantasy XIV, where we're going to be unlocking Bosha and trying to get through that. And then next Thursday will be more Higurashi When They Cry, where we will be doing all of the bad endings of Yoigoshi. So, thank you very much for watching, it is very much appreciated. Do have a wonderful evening and be excellent to each other. Thank you for coming along, and I shall see you guys on Saturday.